The managerial merry-go-round is going absolutely crazy. A manager whose only top-level management experience is getting a Premier League team relegated, is about to be announced as manager of one of the biggest teams in world football, Bayern Munich. Champions League winners, multiple Bundesliga winners, and the home of the greatest striker England has ever produced. The assistant manager of Bayern Munich is about to be a man who once hit a teammate around the head with a golf club. And he will be telling Harry Kane what to do on a day-to-day basis. The world is going mad, football is going mad, but as I like to tell you every single day, this is more a transfer news and gossip show. So I will be bringing you that transfer news and gossip mainly from the Premier League first, and then I will be going on later in this episode to talk more about that mad managerial news coming from Bayern Munich, but also coming from Chelsea, coming potentially from Manchester United as well. All around the world, chairmen are seeing what Xabi Alonso has done and seeing what other young managers have done, and mostly seeing who has assisted Pep Guardiola and saying, I want a young, inexperienced manager. And later in this episode, I'll be talking more about that. But before I get on to the transfer rumours and gossip, guys, thank you so much for watching. Please do give this video a like. Please do press subscribe if you haven't already. I will be doing daily transfer news from the Premier League and overall football news videos throughout this summer, so please do subscribe if you want a bit more of that. Also, this will be on the podcast platform, so go to Spotify or Apple Podcasts, type in the Spurred On podcast, and you'll get some of this in your ears too if you prefer. And if you'd like to support me making this daily content, you can become a Pro member or a Patreon member. All the details in the description box below, only £1 a month. But let's get on to that Premier League transfer news. And starting at Spurs, reports from Italy suggest that Tottenham are convinced, according to the press, they are convinced that they will get a deal for Torino centre-back Alessandro Buongiorno. Now, any Tottenham fans will know that they have Fabio Paratici, their former sporting director, who was then banned from football for frankly being a crook. He may even be a member of the mafia for all we know. All we knew is that he always had his phone on. He had his headphones in and he was on the phone all the time. Well, he's looking to get another centre-back in for Ange Postecoglou, and that is Alessandro Buongiorno, 24 years old, at Torino, but also he is impressing Napoli, Juventus, AC Milan and Inter Milan. So this one might be hard to get over the line. Who knows though with Spurs. They have done well out of the Italian market in recent years because of Paratici. But, you know, let me know in the comments what you think. Are you a Spurs fan? Do you think we should be letting, frankly, a criminal in Fabio Paratici run our transfer dealings, or at least consult us on transfer dealings and still get players in from Italy? Who knows? If he gets the good ones over the line, I'd say we're all for it. But if they're bad signings, then I think we'll turn on him pretty quickly. Moving on from Tottenham Hotspur, Napoli striker, arguably the best number 9 in the world, Victor Osimhen, still only 25 years old. What a career he's had already for someone of his age. Well, he is apparently looking over at what's happening at Chelsea and thinking to himself, that is the flavour of chaos that I want. Also interested in Osimhen are Paris Saint-Germain and Saudi Arabia. But he's looking at those possibilities and thinking, no, I want something much more mental. And actually what I want to do is go to Chelsea and potentially play under like a manager who is 15 years old and has just done his GCSEs. I will talk later about the managers that Chelsea are looking to talk to today. But the reason I talk about 15 years old is Chelsea fans are having kittens at the moment at the names linked with their manager's job. But for some reason, according to the press, Victor Osimhen has his heart set on going to Chelsea. I cannot imagine why. I really cannot. I mean, unless he's not keeping up to date with what is going on there. They've just finished outside of the Champions League places. They may even be in the Conference League, depending on whether Manchester United can somehow produce an absolute miracle and beat Man City in the final of the FA Cup at the weekend. And also they just don't have an ownership structure that can bring success to the club at the moment. They've just sacked a manager who I think had got to grips with what Chelsea had brought in for him, like £1 billion worth of young players all being thrown in together at the same time. Pochettino was finding a way to deal with them. They've sacked him because he dared to suggest to the board that he needed some things that would help him rather than just going with their strategy. I don't know what Victor Osimhen is doing, looking at Chelsea and thinking that is the place to go. Sure, they've won a lot of trophies over the last 20 years, but if you are currently the world's best or one of the two best number 9s, I wouldn't be looking at Stamford Bridge and thinking that is where I want to play my football. But maybe he's always thought his plan is to go to the Premier League at this stage of his career, and maybe realistically he's looking for a club who will be willing to pay him over £400,000 a week in wages. And that is something that Chelsea will be willing to do, and potentially may even do it over like an 8-year contract, knowing what Todd Boehly is like. So they are the reports coming out. He has his heart, Victor Osimhen has his heart set on Chelsea. In other Chelsea news, apparently they're also sniffing around Jordan Pickford at Everton, England's number 1. A really excellent goalkeeper, I think. He gets a lot of stick, but he's a great shot stopper, and most importantly, especially in terms of his role as England's number 1. In international football these days, I really think a lot of goalkeeping is about your distribution, and Pickford is an elite distributor of the ball with his feet and with his hands, throwing as well. And Chelsea not really blessed in the goalkeeping department at the moment. Since the heady days of Petr Cech and Thibaut Courtois, they've now gone down the route of obviously Kepa, who they paid, I think, £75 million for, and he was sent out on loan to, was it Real? I think he was definitely in Spain this year. Was it Real or Atletico? Let me know in the comments. I think it was Real Madrid, and he wasn't even getting in the Real Madrid side. He won't be playing in the Champions League final, that's for sure. He wasn't in the semi. And then since then, they've gone for Sanchez at Brighton, and he's not even number 1 anymore either. So they're looking at Jordan Pickford potentially, but from everything the press are saying, Pickford says he is happy at Everton. In fact, he did just sign a new contract at Everton last season, which I thought was a bit mad considering all of their financial issues and how they're in a relegation scrap every season. But Pickford clearly has some kind of loyalty to Everton, and under Sean Dyche, he will be asked to play many, many long balls once again next season if Chelsea do not get their way and get him through the door. I mentioned Saudi Arabia earlier on. Al Nassr in Saudi Arabia are eyeing up someone, a player, one of the good players in one of the best players in the Premier League, I'd say, but for some reason he chooses to dive on the floor anytime he comes within 10 yards of an opposition player. But they are looking, Al Nassr, at Bruno Fernandes, now 29 years old, at Manchester United. Obviously, he is a mainstay of that Man United team. Let me know what you think about Bruno Fernandes, because he definitely divides opinion. He is a great player, but for me, he's a bit of a selfish player. Like, I look at Christian Eriksen and this season at Man United, and he hasn't got any minutes in the number 10 spot at all, in the number 10 position. But that's because of Bruno Fernandes. So what they sometimes do there, or what Ten Hag sometimes does, is drops Eriksen into the number 8 role, and sometimes even plays as number 6, and that is not his position. It really isn't. And with Christian Eriksen in the number 10, he will unlock defences unlike any other player that Manchester United have. He really will. He did it Inter Milan, he did it for years at Spurs. He's such a talent at that, and he's wasted in the 6 or the 8, but he doesn't get to play in the 10 because of Fernandes. Now, Fernandes is a talented player and has scored lots of goals, but surely you could move Fernandes out to kind of a narrow left-sided position or something, especially when Rashford's not been on good form this season, and fit in Eriksen and Fernandes in those forward positions together. Now, of course, playing devil's advocate on that, contradicting myself a little bit, will they both get back enough and do their defensive duties enough to help Man United, especially in a season where they had real problems in the back four with injuries? Maybe not, and maybe that's where Ten Hag has been having to fit kind of round pegs and square holes, etc., and not play them both in those forward positions. But Bruno Fernandes at 29, Saudi Arabia sniffing around him. Apparently United want to tie him down to a new contract. That wouldn't surprise me. I don't think the Manchester United fans would be happy at all if they sold Bruno Fernandes at the moment. But when Saudi Arabia comes sniffing and the players know what kind of money they can get every single week if they go out and play in Saudi Arabia, you just never say never. Maybe Bruno wants to go out there and face up against his old foe, Cristiano Ronaldo. They look like they get on together when they play for Portugal, but at Man United, they just couldn't win together, could they? Moving on to Liverpool transfer news. Arne Slot has now officially been announced as their new manager, and some reports are saying he is in pole position to sign Feyenoord keeper Justin Bijlo. Justin Bijlo, the keeper from Feyenoord. But in another publication, and this really tells you everything about the transfer rumours and gossip that happens at the beginning of the summer when it starts to wheel back up into action with the transfer window about to open. Arsenal also looking at Bijlo as well as they look to replace Aaron Ramsdale as their backup number 1. A lot of talk about Ramsdale over the last few weeks. There was talk that Newcastle had actually got that deal done at around £15 million, but then Ramsdale tweeted himself or put on Instagram himself, "News to me." So he clearly doesn't think that Newcastle deal is anywhere near done. But Newcastle are still sniffing around him. But apparently, as I mentioned earlier, Chelsea looking for a new keeper, and they are looking at Ramsdale too. Ramsdale is going to the Euros as England's number 2 this summer because Nick Pope suffered a terrible injury this season. He's only just come back for Newcastle. In fact, he played in Newcastle's ridiculous friendly in Melbourne against Spurs yesterday, which finished 1-1, but Newcastle winning on penalties. That game kind of started with both teams playing pretty much full strength sides, and then at halftime all the substitutions came in, and it was what a waste of time it was sending those clubs out there. Tottenham got a lot of stick for sending their team out there straight after the season, whereas Newcastle seemed to have got off it a little more. However, what nobody seems to have talked about is that Newcastle are playing another friendly there later this week, I think, against the Australian All-Star side. So that is ridiculous. But Newcastle looking at Aaron Ramsdale even more, but Chelsea sniffing about too. Over to Manchester City transfer rumours and news now. Bernardo Silva, now 29 years old, so heading towards his 30s. If you remember, over the last few transfer windows, certainly the last couple of summers, he has kind of quite openly said he would be willing to leave Manchester City. It seems like he's up for some kind of new challenge and has been for a while. And Man City now saying that he can leave the club if anyone comes in and bids £50 million for him. £50 million is a lot of money for a 29-year-old, despite the fact Bernardo Silva is an absolute Rolls Royce of a footballer. He will be great wherever he goes. However, £50 million for a 29-year-old is so much money, and let's face it, I think there's only probably one place, one nation state, who would be willing to pay that kind of money for that age of player. And if Bernardo Silva fancies all the coin in the world, he can go over to Saudi Arabia and play in front of 400 people every single week if he wants. I cannot see another Premier League club or European club coming in at £50 million. But let me know what you think in the comments. Bernardo Silva, would you want your club to pay £50 million for him? He is a great player, but obviously no sell-on value when he's just heading into his 30s. Other bits of Manchester City transfer news. Kevin De Bruyne has apparently been talking to San Diego FC in the MLS about potential future moves there. There's no evidence apparently directly that he wants to leave now. He's just getting his ducks in a row. De Bruyne is in his 30s now, but still an absolute mainstay of that City side. It would be very difficult, I think, for Man City to replace both Silva and De Bruyne if they were to leave at the same time, say that was this summer. So I think that would be a little too much to happen. Obviously, as I mentioned in yesterday's video, Pep Guardiola, according to Fabrizio Romano, looking at the end of next season as potentially a time to leave Manchester City. Could that really be the end of an era at City if you're losing Guardiola, Silva, De Bruyne, and of course potentially seeing a punishment handed down for all those financial fair play and profit and sustainability rules charges? However, another bit of news coming out of Man City over the last 24 hours or so has been that the UK government have been in talks with the Abu Dhabi government about those charges. And if there's any way you could see Manchester City getting off the financial doping that they've been doing for the last 15 years or so, it would be if the UK government got involved. Now, yesterday, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak announced a general election for July the 4th, and you would have thought for sure with a 21-point poll lead, Labour will get in. And I would like to think that Labour, the Labour Party, kind of not that far to the left, but further to the left than the Tory party, would not be willing to get involved in corrupt talks with the Abu Dhabi government about kind of swapping those 115 charges for potentially some trade routes or trade benefits to the UK. I'd like to think Sir Keir Starmer would not get involved in that. It went a bit political there, I apologise. Let's get back to the transfer rumours. Newcastle United, as I mentioned earlier this week, now apparently incredibly close to getting Tosin from Fulham and Lloyd Kelly from Bournemouth through the door on free transfers. Good squad depth moves for Eddie Howe there. Not the kind of exciting moves that I think the Newcastle fans would have wanted at this stage, having been bought by a nation state themselves, but they are having to adhere to profit and sustainability rules, basically because of what Manchester City have done over so many years. Now, if a nation state comes in and buys a club and wants to hoover up everything, they cannot do it. And Newcastle are suffering from that situation. And as I mentioned yesterday, may even have to sell before they can buy. Over to West Ham. They are interested and looking to get Flamengo centre-back Fabrizio Bruno through the door. He's been capped twice by Brazil, and their incoming manager, Julian Lopetegui, really likes him. Apparently, they've double-checked, and he's never tried to kick a cat in a bin, so they want him through the door to maybe even play alongside Kurt Zouma. How on earth did that all get forgotten about? If you're a West Ham fan, I'm sure you'll be angry with me for even bringing it up, but that was another mad bit of football. Football just gets madder every single day. Crystal Palace had a brilliant end to their season, and they are looking to improve their fans' delirium by getting Morocco and Real Betis centre-back Chad Riyad, 20 years old, through the door. Looking at about £14 million for him. I'm really fascinated to see where Crystal Palace go next season. They've had a lot of forced dawns over the last 10 years or so. They've been a yo-yo club a little bit over the last 2 decades, but with Oliver Glasner, they seem to have kind of stumbled on the best manager they've had in a long time. If they can keep Michael Elise and Eberechi Eze, then they could be a real force to be reckoned with, especially at Selhurst Park next season. But the Vultures are sniffing around Elise and Eze, that's for sure. And as a Spurs fan, I'm hoping Tottenham are one of those vultures. Adam Wharton as well, the centre midfielder there, has done an incredible job since he came in from Blackburn just in January. He's made it into Gareth Southgate's preliminary Euro squad. If he were to have a breakout Euros, maybe he would be interesting other clubs too. And Crystal Palace may not turn down an offer to really, quadruple the money they spent on him straight away. Who knows? If you're a Palace fan, let me know in the comments how excited you are for next season. As I said at the top of the show, I'll now get into some of the mad managerial news that is doing the rounds. Vincent Kompany seems to be the man that Bayern Munich are going to appoint as their new manager. In fact, by the time this video goes out at 5 p.m, I'm recording it just before lunchtime, he may already have been announced. It's madness to me that his only elite managerial experience is having got Burnley relegated from the Premier League this season. Now, sure, playing devil's advocate, he was consistent in the style of football that he wanted to play. He was single-minded. He wanted to get on the front foot. He took it to all of the teams, even the biggest teams in the league, when they played there. I get that. But is that really going to be enough for the Bayern fans and players to stick with him if they have a bad start, if they lose a few games on the spin? You've got to look at it like that. It's like the one thing Vincent Kompany does have going for him in that scenario is that at least he was an elite player in his time, so the players will give him respect for that. However, if things start to go sour and the players at Bayern Munich, who are most of them on plus over £250,000 a week, if they're looking at their manager and saying, and probably even discussing in their WhatsApp groups, why are we being managed by a man whose only experience at this level is having got relegated in his only season? That, I'm sorry, I know what's going on here. I get it. That all these clubs are looking at Xabi Alonso and the success they've had, and they're looking at Arteta at Arsenal and saying, oh, well, he was the assistant to Pep Guardiola. We need to follow that kind of template. But the lack of experience of these managers that are being talked about with these big jobs, it just doesn't give them any collateral if things start to go wrong. Another example of this, Chelsea. They want to speak to Enzo Maresca, Leicester manager. He just won Leicester the league, but he stumbled over the line. The football is good there. He took them up, but only just. The only reason I can think that they're looking at him is because of what happened with Arteta, having been Pep Guardiola's assistant. They're looking at that and thinking, well, Maresca was Pep Guardiola's assistant too. Let's get him through the door. But Arteta was a top-level player. He'd played in the Premier League for years, so he has that stature. He has that respect already. And Arsenal gave him an unbelievable amount of patience. The fans wanted him out after the first season or two at Arsenal. They had to stick with him. Is there any chance Chelsea will give Maresca that kind of patience? Absolutely not. They are a win now club. If they don't win now, the fans will hound him out. They will absolutely hound him out. Apparently, Chelsea also looking to talk to Kieran McKenna today, by which I mean they're already speaking to Ipswich about can they get a deal sorted for McKenna. So they're lining up their ducks. Will it be Maresca? Will it be McKenna? And it's complete madness to me. And I can totally see why the Chelsea influencers and the Chelsea fans are absolutely steaming at the moment, because their club has gone from this absolute kind of, for 20 years under Abramovich, behemoth of we will buy the best players and we will get the best managers, to suddenly being bought by Clearlake and Todd Bowley, and suddenly being like, we got to do this like Football Manager. We'll get out all of the experienced players. We'll bring in all the young players. We'll get young, inexperienced managers like you would be if you were managing Chelsea on a football management game. And it's just not how it works. You cannot run a club like that, and it is absolutely laughable. As I said, recording this at lunchtime, so by the time this has gone out, they may have appointed Zippy from Rainbow as their manager. Who knows? Another bit of news, Maurizio Pochettino, who's obviously being talked about as a potential Man United manager after the cup final, because all reports that came out yesterday are that Erik ten Hag will be sacked from Manchester United after the cup final, come what may, no matter what happens in that. Well, Maurizio Pochettino is linked with that, but he's also now being linked with the England manager's job after the Euros. Lots of talk that Gareth Southgate will resign after these Euros. This will be his last tournament. He's looking to get a club job too. And Pochettino is interesting the FA. I personally would love Pochettino to be England manager. He's an unbelievable man manager, but he's also tactically forward thinking. He would get those players playing really hard-working, high-pressing, forward-thinking football. It would excite me a lot. Let me know in the comments what you would think about Maurizio Pochettino as the England manager. I think he'd be a great frontman for England. And with the England national job, let's face it, about 98% of it genuinely is politics and saying the right thing. Next up, I mentioned Xabi Alonso earlier. Everybody, as I've said numerous times on this video, everybody at every club, every chairman wants somebody like him. But last night, he was given a mauling in the Europa League final by experienced grey-haired old man manager Gianpiero Gasperini. Now, will it go full circle? And everyone looks at that 3-0 victory for Atalanta and Gasperini and says, maybe what we need is an old man grey manager. You just don't know, because football is so mental. Props to Adam Mola-Lookman, ex-Charlton, ex-Fulham, ex-Everton player, who frankly was kind of hounded out of the Premier League, deemed not to be good enough to make it happen in the Premier League, scored a hat-trick in the Europa League final. Fair play to him. Next up, bit of European news. According to Fabrizio Romano, Barcelona are looking at Hansi Flick as their new manager if their on-again, off-again divorce with Xavi finally goes through. Barcelona only have about £3 billion worth of debt, so what could possibly go wrong there for any new manager going in? I'm kind of expecting them to do a Chelsea and sell their own urinals to their own sister company for £2 billion sometime this summer so that they can buy more players. But apparently Hansi Flick going there potentially to replace Xavi. Other bits of mad news, Arsene Wenger is absolutely determined to push through his mad offside rule. Have you heard about this? If you haven't, the rule that he wants to make is that if any striker's scoreable part of his body is in line with any part of the body of the defender, that is onside. Jamie Carragher has already come out and said that this will ruin defending as it is. Already we've seen this season in the Premier League, because of the amount of added time they're putting on at the end of games, there are now so many goals in every single game already. I do not think we need an offside rule where there's going to be 4 or 5 or 6 more goals a game. That's just ridiculous. Surely there has to be a compromise they can make between the current madness of the VAR offsides where they're drawing lines. They don't know if the lines are at the right angle. They don't know when the ball is officially leaving the foot of the passing player. Surely they can find a compromise between that and Wenger's mad rules. Completely crazy. And my final bit of news today from Europe, Toni Kroos has decided to retire at the top. His last game for his club will be the Champions League final. What a class act he is. If only Moussa Sissoko could have made the same decision back in 2019, ideally after the semi-final. I think all Spurs fans would be happy. Guys, thank you so much for watching today's transfer rumours and mostly Premier League news and some news from around Europe. Please do press like, do subscribe to my channel for more of this daily transfer news, and also go over to the podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Type in the Spurred On podcast with Barnaby Slater. You'll find it here and you can listen to it there every day as well. And if you want to support my daily content, only £1 a month, you can become a Pro member or a Patreon member. All the details in the description box below. Have a great day. I'm sure by the end of it, some more crazy managerial merry-go-round action will have happened. Goodbye.